Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Joy-Filled Universe podcast. I am your host, Lisa Ryan, who is getting a little bit anxious about the holidays. Holy smokes! December is just flying by, and there is just not a whole lot of jolly, at least not as much as I would like at this moment. But I am hanging in there and remaining optimistic because it is the most wonderful time of year after all. And so with all of the incredible December holidays, the one that I personally celebrate is Christmas. And I am not one of those people who does any holiday shopping before Thanksgiving. So for me, when I see Santa Claus pulling up the rear of the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, it is only then that I get started on my holiday shopping list, because that to me is when the holiday season has officially begun. However, this year, Thanksgiving is just so close. I think there's only like 4 weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas this year. And other years, it just feels like there was so much more time. So I am feeling a bit behind. And then when I fold in work, seeing friends, my Joy-Filled Universe effort, seeing family, and a little bit of travel too, it can just all get a little bit heavy. Do you know what I mean? Are any of you experiencing this holiday heaviness to some degree? Or are you just one of those incredible, magical holiday light auras that just keeps shining in all the best ways? And if you are amazing, and please send me some of that vibe. I would love it, because I got a little work to do. And I will say I have personally noticed that in my holiday frenzy, when things get a little bit cray-cray, as they are right now, negative thoughts and emotions are just waiting for that weak moment in my high vibe. And to my credit, I still am sticking to my no negativity effort that I established on my birthday back in November. So I am open and intentionally searching for ways to keep the grumpy negative thoughts at bay. And now, with that being said, many of you have picked up on the fact by now that I am a big Rhonda Byrne fan. And one of the things that I noticed from reading and listening and watching Rhonda was a very specific technique that she has messaged routinely. She says that when she has a negative thought, she welcomes it, and she is aware of it, and she just lets it pass through her. And when she does this, the impact is not as significant as it could be. And the more she does it, if that thought should happen to come back around again, the impact is less and less until it just goes completely unnoticed and disappears. Okay, so after absorbing all of this, I needed to know more. So I got into my sleuthing because I wanted to figure it out. Where did Rhonda come up with this incredible technique? Is it her original thought? Did she learn it from someone else? What is the origin? Well, after some digging and reading, I am going to share what I discovered. And I honestly think that it is something many, if not all of us, could benefit from at any time, especially during stressful moments. And it is something called the Sedona Method, which is a technique that is going to sound very simple, but the science and the spiritual magic behind it is really awesome. So today's pod is going to be a high-level approach to the Sedona Method. And my hope is that we can all learn to apply this technique with the goal of dialing back our stress-based emotions and living more in a calm, peaceful, and joyful state. So that was a super long intro, my friends. And now I'm going to get back on track. And first, let's talk about the Sedona Method. Okay, so it is a method that was created by a gentleman named Lester Levinson, a physicist and engineer who, after experiencing a major health crisis in 1952, where doctors basically sent him home because he had endured a second heart attack, and it was believed that he literally had weeks to live. And this was a guy who seemed to have it all. Lester had a penthouse overlooking Central Park in New York City. He had friends, successful businesses, tons of money, but he was apparently very emotionally charged in lots of negative ways. So after being sick and sent home with weeks to live, he turned himself into his own lab and figured out how to do a complete 180. So much so that he ended up living another 42 years. So what Lester Levinson had largely come to realize was that emotional suppression was destroying his body. He noticed that whenever he felt fear, anger, guilt, or stress, and he chose to genuinely let it go rather than hold on to it, he became happier, his body improved, his energy expanded in high vibrational ways, and his inner peace returned, and his life just in general got better. So over the next several years, he continued to explore this release process. And then in the early 1970s, he formalized his work into a structured system that became known as the Sedona Method. And I believe, not 100% sure, but I think the name was from Sedona, Arizona, which is where I believe they literally started teaching this method there. So I don't know. Don't hold me to that part. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's how the story goes. So anyway, Lester Levinson, he created the Sedona Method, and Lester was a mentor to a gentleman by the name of Hale Dwoskin, who later developed and continues to teach this technique worldwide. And he even wrote a book called The Sedona Method, Your Key to Lasting Happiness, Success, Peace, and Emotional Well-Being. And I will put that link in the episode description for all of you if you'd like to check it out, because I have read it. It's a good book. All right, so for today, we are going to look through the lens of Lisa, and I am going to say that the Sedona Method is a simple emotional releasing technique, and it's designed to help us stop fighting or resisting our feelings, stop storing stress in our bodies, stop recycling emotional patterns, and return to our natural state of clarity and calm. Because at the end of the day, emotions only become a problem when we choose to attach ourselves to them. And I'm going to say that again. Emotions only become a problem when we choose to attach ourselves to them. And what I mean by this is the problem isn't the feeling itself. It's when the mind grabs it and says things like, this means something to me, or I need to defend myself. I need to control this. They are wrong. I am right. Or this always happens to me. And with these thoughts and the feelings that are derived from them, this is where we start to spiral. However, the really good news is if we can learn to let the feeling rise up and welcome it and then let it pass and not create any kind of story around it, and most especially not identify with it, we can keep our peace intact. And now, before we get into this technique, I just want to clarify that one of the biggest misconceptions around emotional work is that letting go means pretending that nothing is happening. And that could not be farther from the truth. Letting go is not ignoring, suppressing, pretending, minimizing, or sweeping things under the carpet. Rather, letting go is welcoming the emotion, allowing it to be felt, realizing the separation between the body's innate peace from the mind's ego-driven reactivity, and then releasing the emotional charge so that it dissolves naturally and we don't have to end up carrying what is not ours. So please keep that in mind. Letting go in this way is all about allowing our body to stay in its natural state of joy and peace. Okay, so I said this is simple, and it really is, because there are only 3 to 4 questions that we get to ask ourselves when we are enduring an emotional jolt of negativity. And I say 3 to 4 questions because there are 2 versions. One is a 4-question technique that includes welcoming the feeling first, which is so helpful when we are emotionally triggered, we feel overwhelmed, we are navigating stressful times like the holidays, we find ourselves in a reactive state, or we need gentleness and more self-compassion. The other is a 3-step technique that includes the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th questions of the version I just mentioned, but it leaves out the first question that is about welcoming the feeling. And you use this version when you're looking to just release reoccurring patterns, or when you're trying to dissolve goals, or better yet, it's really effective when we just want to move quickly through the layers. Both of them work, both are correct. Both are taught as part of the Sedona Method. So use the one that feels easier for you in the moment. But for today's pod, I am going to go with the 4-question method so that we can all get the flick on the 4 questions that we get to ask ourselves. So the technique unfolds in this order. The first question we ask when we are feeling emotionally triggered or going through a stressful time is, could I welcome this feeling? Because welcoming is powerful. It allows us to release what we are resisting. Next question, could I let this go? Or another way to ask that is, can I allow this feeling to exist without fighting or resisting it? Next, would I let it go? Or another way to ask this particular question is, am I willing to release it, even if it's just a small portion, like 5 or 10%. And then the last question is when. And here's a hint. The answer to this question is almost always now. And something to keep in mind when working through these questions is we don't need to force anything. We don't need to overthink it. And we don't need to do a deep dive into our trauma. We just welcome the feeling. We soften around it, and then we let it fall away on its own. And from this, we will experience emotional alchemy, our nervous system healing, and it just brings us to a level of spiritual alignment with our core energy of joy and peace. Okay, so along with Miss Rhonda Byrne is another one of my favorites, Dr. Joe Dispenza. And when I learn new techniques and tools, I love to cross-check things and connect dots with other information that I have picked up from my studies. So Dr. Dispenza's material often messages about his studies around the power of the human mind when we lean into positive thinking and mindset. And he says that the average person spends 70% of their life in survival mode, meaning the brain and the body are stuck in fight or flight chemistry most of the time, which is stunning to me because we have spoken about this in past pods, and I just want to reiterate this really quickly. When we are in survival mode, the amygdala, which is like our fear center of the brain, is in charge. The body is flooded with stress hormones, the heart rhythm becomes chaotic, intuition shuts down, the brain is nowhere near creative mode, and worst of all, our future starts to become invisible because we are so busy surviving. And if we are looking to manifest our best lives, well, being in this kind of state, it ain't gonna get us there because it is a giant roadblock for us. Yet, if we practice techniques like the Sedona Method, well then, we calm the fear center of our brain instantly by welcoming the feeling instead of resisting it. Our brain receives a signal of safety. The amygdala relaxes and the fight or flight is turned off, and our body chemistry then shifts within seconds. And when this shift occurs, our prefrontal cortex, or as I like to call it, our manifestation brain, it reactivates. And that is a dream because it is this part of our brain that is responsible for creativity, intuition, visioning the future, and problem solving. So by releasing emotional negative charge, our prefrontal cortex, it just lights up and we move from survival into creation. And another thing that the Sedona Method does is it breaks the emotional feedback loop. Normally, our mind and emotions play a game of ping pong, or in today's world, I'm just going to say it plays a game of pickleball. And so it goes from thought to feeling, from thought to feeling, and that equals stress. And the Sedona Method, it interrupts that loop by bringing us into our body instead of staying in the mind where we continuously replay the mental stories that we are creating or have created. And And it is also creating a healthy form of emotional detachment because we are asking ourselves these questions. We are helping our brain to realize that I am not this emotion. In fact, I am the awareness behind it. This de-identifying effect, it reduces neural activity that could be tied to the ego, which is creating those negative stories. When the mind grabs a negative thought and begins to create an entire story based on assumptions and interpretations, it is then that the negative charge that might be stored in those neural pathways that we might have created, well, it all just starts to get fired up, which means survival mode, here we come. However, 4 simple questions can help diffuse all of that. And the more we learn to do it, the better we become at it because it becomes less of a technique and more of a way of life. And let's be honest, the energetic shift that comes with this Sedona method, it is pretty powerful because when we release the emotion and de-identify with it, which I'm just going to pause for a second here. I certainly hope de-identify is a word. And if it's not, you know what I mean, right? So please just bear with. Anyway, so when we de-identify with it, it is then that we get to separate ourselves from the emotions. Remember the question, could I let this go? That alone raises our frequency fast. Think about that cork example we used once upon a time. Remember holding the cork under the water? It equates to holding the negative thought, right? Resistance. And then when we let it go and it quickly bobs back up to the surface, that is just a wonderful metaphor for how we feel when we release the low vibe energy and return to our natural, blissful, bobbing on the water, joy-filled state. And the Sedona method, it is something that dissolves resistance, fear, anxiety, overwhelm, all low frequency vibes. Letting go brings us into peacefulness, openness, joy, clarity, abundant consciousness, and creativity. And it is also here that our intuition is apparent because we drop the emotional noise and we are open to receiving things like answers to our questions. We recognize signs and those amazing universal nudges. Opportunities just present themselves and life just feels lighter because our internal and our external worlds are in harmony. All right, so let's go through a few examples of the Sedona method in practice. And I'm going to give you a hypothetical, and then I'll give you some real-time Lisa efforts because trust and believe, I have been leaning way into this technique lately. So, an example, holiday stress and overwhelm. So, say we are feeling overwhelmed because we have too much to do before the holidays. Well, the first step is noticing and welcoming the feeling, which could be, I am welcoming the awareness that I feel this heaviness in my chest and I am overwhelmed. And then we can ask, could I let this go? And we check in with our body and we think to ourselves, yeah, maybe a little. And the next question, would I let it go? And the answer to ourselves could be, yeah, I'm willing to let it go. And then lastly, when? And the answer is now. And then imagine the pressure and the heaviness just softening. And just by doing this, the emotional intensity will noticeably drop instantly, which is already enough for our nervous system to just start shifting out of survival mode. All right, we are going to do a few more examples. I am going to do one more hypothetical because this is something I also deal with as a human. And so is it really hypothetical? She'll never tell, but I am going to go through this one because I think we can all relate. And it's a simple relationship example, right? Someone annoys us. It could be our partner, our friend, our boss, a coworker, anyone. And say they say something that is just really irritating. The first thing we do is we welcome the feeling through awareness. And we could say something like, I feel the heat of fury right now as blood is just rushing to my head and I am annoyed. Could I let this go? And maybe the answer here is no, but I could allow the irritation to be here. And believe it or not, that is still a win because there is awareness there. And with awareness, there is separation between us and that feeling. And then we could say, would I let it go? And maybe the answer is not fully, but I could release about 10% of it. And then the last question is when? And the answer becomes now. Deep exhale, drop those shoulders and feel better because what is happening here is the overall sting is softening. We become less reactive, our clarity returns, and we can be responsive rather than reacting. All right, now for me, I am going to be honest. I have been very focused on the Sedona Method, and just in the past couple of days, I am going to give you two really great examples. So the first example is this. At my job, my day job, I had a coworker who really isn't someone that I work with all that often, but something had set them off. So maybe they were having a bad day. I'm not sure. I'm not in charge of their feelings. But anyway, they came to my office and just became more and more aggravated. And maybe I wasn't picking up on their energy and reacting as expected. So they just continued to turn up the volume. And all of a sudden, things got a little bit personal rather than keeping it professional. And then they abruptly left my office. And there it was. First, I was aware and I welcomed the feeling because guess what? I am a Scorpio and I don't walk away from anything without some sort of resolution. So the fact that this person dropped a giant stink bomb of negativity in my lap and then left, I was just so frustrated. So I felt my heart pounding. I felt my face getting hot, and I was feeling so annoyed that my peaceful state had been completely disrupted. And then I asked myself, can I let this go? And the answer was yes, I can let it go because I really don't like how it feels. And then I asked, would I let it go? And I said, yes, I will. I will fully let this go because it doesn't serve me in a good way. And then lastly, when? And I said to myself, right now. And that was it. My mind no longer was chasing the emotion or creating a story or building a defense. I just let it go. And I will admit, it wanted to come back, and it did. I ran through the questions again and again, and right away, everything began to feel better. It felt more peaceful and back in control of me and how I choose to feel. So every time I felt it creep back in, I ran through those questions, and it just helped me feel a world better. All right, now another example for me, which it just cuts a bit deeper because this was my personal world. And it goes like this. Recently, I was supposed to have a holiday gathering with a really super close human in my life. And this was something I was genuinely looking forward to. And through a miscommunication, the plans had fallen through. And as a result, I was under the impression that we will not be getting together. So when that happened, I naturally noticed and had awareness of the immediate feelings rising up in my body. I felt sad. I felt lonely. I felt disappointed. And if I'm being really honest, even though it was a shared unfolding, heck, my friend could have been feeling the same way as I was for all I knew. But I was being flooded with low vibe emotions because I was so excited to spend time with them. So what did I do? Well, instead of pushing my feelings away or telling myself that I shouldn't be feeling this way, I chose to do something different and I welcomed the feeling because, as we have learned, welcoming doesn't mean I liked the feeling or wanted it to stay. It just meant I stopped fighting it. I let the sensation be there in my body without analyzing it, without judging myself, and without creating a story around it. I just let the sadness be sadness, I let the loneliness be loneliness, and I let the disappointment just sit there. And I noticed something interesting. When I dropped the inner resistance, my body softened. I wasn't spiraling in my head. I wasn't blaming myself or the other person. I was just present with what was. Then, once the feeling was fully allowed, I gently asked myself the Sedona questions. Can I let this feeling go? And I didn't force the answer. I just noticed what came up, and it was yes. Then I asked, would I let it go? Again, no pressure, just honesty. And it was yes, at least a good percent of it. And then finally, when? And what I love about this question is that it invites release without effort. It allows the nervous system to relax, and it gives permission. And whether we answer now or later, something shifts the moment we stop gripping the feeling. What I noticed is that the heaviness started to loosen. The charge around the sadness softened. It didn't mean the situation just magically changed, but my relationship to it did. And that is where profound release happens. I stopped the feeling of being run by emotion. Rather, I was aware of it, I was allowing it, and I was gently letting it release. And that's the power of the Sedona Method. It doesn't deny human emotion, it honors it. And from that honoring, release naturally happens. And this certainly feels amazing. And I just want to let you know too, there was a happy ending. I just have to share that because I definitely got back on my high vibe thanks to the Sedona Method. And shortly thereafter, my friend pinged me and they had some time open up where they were going to be in the area. So we will see each other after all. And granted, it's not going to be as long, but I will take it. So thank you, universe. Thank you for allowing me to release bad emotions, and thank you for allowing me to be open to receiving. I am so grateful. And I have to believe again that this redirection of thought, as I was just saying, it was getting me back on my high vibe. And it is certainly one of the main reasons why everything, including my emotions, shifted for the better. All right, so there we have it. That is the Sedona Method, my friends, and I am practicing it often, and it really makes a difference, which is why I wanted to share it with all of you this week. So to recap this technique, here it is. Welcome it. Be aware of the feeling and let it be there without analyzing it, and certainly not judging yourself because of it. Could I let this go, right? Could I allow this feeling to be here without resisting it? Because remember, what we resist persists. Would I let it go? Am I willing to soften my grip on this feeling, even if it's just a little bit? And then when? When am I willing to let it go? If now feels right, release it. If you need to run through the process again, do it. And if another layer comes up, release that too. Let your body unwind, let your energy rise, and let your nervous system come home to safety. And that's a wrap for this week. The greatest gift we can give ourselves this holiday season isn't perfection, it's presence. And the Sedona Method is an invitation to step out of survival mode, return to our body, release our stress, and be the best version of ourselves and create life consciously, because we deserve a rest, we deserve ease and flow. And it is here too that I would usually love to insert a quote, but instead I want to shine a light on the infamous Serenity Prayer, which is about empowered choice and discernment. And it goes like this: God, divine, source, universe, or whatever term you choose to insert here, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And on that sparkly note, I hope that you found today's episode to be helpful and applicable to your world. And if you did, please give me the incredible Christmas gift of following, rating, leaving a review, sharing a screenshot of the episode on social media, or even just sharing it with a friend. All of this helps me out, and I am forever grateful for your support. So happy holidays, everyone. I am your host, Lisa Ryan. This is the Joy-Filled Universe podcast, where we explore all of the tools and tricks that are going to make your universe even more joyful than it already is. And I will see you next week. Bye.